Okay, good morning. The first talk is by John Muller. It's going to be in English. John joins us from Google in Zurich, who's done a lot of work with all the various teams on webmaster tools, search console, and so on. And he's going to tell us today about about managing your online presence in Google search.
Okay, wow, great to see so many of you here. So just to kind of roughly understand again, I think about half of you work with WordPress professionally. Was that about right from the show of hands beforehand? How many of you do SEO? Anybody? Okay, wow, bunch of people, that's good. Okay, so you'll know some of what I'll be talking about. I have a mix of some more complicated things and some more general things. If there's anything that you want more information on, we should have some time for questions afterwards. And you're always welcome to grab me in between in the breaks. And I also do office hour hangouts where you can join us on YouTube and ask questions live if you want to do that. So just very briefly about me, I'm a Webmaster Trends Analyst, which is a fancy name for someone, I don't know how, I don't think this is like a common job, but what we do is we work together with the search engineering team, so the people who make Google search, and we try to connect them with webmasters and publishers and people like you, people who make the actual websites. And that's something that's really important for us because our engineers, they like to work on their problems, on their code, and they don't like to get distracted by all of these SEOs and people asking questions and all of these conspiracy theories that make their rounds. So that's kind of where we come in, where we talk with the engineers, make sure that the information that is available externally is kind of useful and helpful for people to make good websites. And also that the worries that you all have, where you're like, I don't know what to do with my website so that Google understands it well, so that is also brought back to the team and that we can work out what we need to do there. You can find me on Google+, is probably easiest. I'm also on Twitter. We also have the google.com/webmasters page where there's more general information, links to Search Console, links to our documentation, all of that. So we have, I think, like 30 minutes and then maybe 10 minutes for questions and answers. I will try to speed up and slow down where I see people saying, oh, this is so obvious, or where I see people scratching their head and wondering what it actually means. If there's something really unclear that you definitely don't understand what I'm talking about, raise your hand and just ask. That's perfectly fine. There's lots of things here, and it's a short time, so make sure to take advantage of that. So first, I'll be talking very briefly how search works. I think that's very helpful for anyone who wants to be active in a search engine, who wants to be visible there, to understand that this is not a magic black box that just magically understands the whole internet and sends people to the right places, but there's actually like normal processes behind that. Then I want to talk briefly about some best practices that we've seen with regards to making a website so that you have a chance of being visible as much as possible in search, and then some tips about technology, things that you can do to improve things in general. All right, so how search works. All very easy, right? So we have it generally split into three main categories that we look at from our side, from the engineering side, from the search engine side. On the one hand, we have crawling. Crawling is when Googlebot goes off and looks at all of the websites on the web, all of the content, when we kind of go step by step to see what all is out there. Indexing is when we take that content that we've seen and we try to organize it and figure out where does this belong. And then serving is the part that most users see when you use Google. You enter a question, and it brings a list of results. And these are all kind of separate steps in that when you enter a question, Googlebot doesn't go off and look on the internet, where could this possibly be? But rather, we have to collect that early on. We have to know about that ahead of time. So the crawling and indexing part is, whoops, Googlebot's name got cut off. Kind of roughly like this, in the sense that they're separate, distinct parts which are kind of useful to know about, especially as a webmaster. So we start with a collection of URLs that we have in the corner here. These are pages that we know about already. So we started somewhere on the internet. We've collected a lot of pages over time. We start out with these URLs. We have to look at these pages regularly. So Googlebot tries to see which pages might have been changed recently and which pages maybe we should look at again. So that's a very complicated process, actually, to figure out which ones we should crawl again. Then Googlebot is very polite. Googlebot comes with flowers for the webmaster. The first thing that Googlebot does is ask, may I look at these URLs on your website? So it looks at the robots text file on the server to see, am I allowed to look at these pages or not? And if you say no, Googlebot is not allowed to look, then that's fine. Googlebot is OK with that. Then another thing that Googlebot does is it tries to limit the amount of requests that it makes for the server. So instead of going to the server and saying, oh, I know you have 500,000 pages, please give them all to me now. Googlebot will go and ask for these pages on a daily basis, maybe, and build up that collection step by step so that it doesn't cause any problems for the server. And that's really important for us. And that's something that you can control on your side as well, in that if your server is very fast, we can crawl a lot of pages. We can pick up those changes on your website very quickly. But if your server is very slow, or if you have a WordPress installation that uses like a slow database, or something else is very slow on your side, then Googlebot will be limited and will not be able to look at all of the content that it wants to look at. So that's something kind of to keep in mind. Googlebot takes the content that it can crawl, brings it to the indexing side, where we take it apart and look at what we've actually found. And one thing that's fairly new in the last couple of years that we do is a rendering of all of the pages that we crawl. Essentially, we try to look at the page in the way that a browser might look at it. And this is particularly important for pages that use JavaScript frameworks. So if you have a fancy JavaScript framework that pulls in content with JavaScript, or if you have APIs that pull in maps and other listings and event calendars and all of that, so that Googlebot can actually index that content, we have to render the whole page and see what it looks like in a browser. And at the moment, this is done with a somewhat older version of Chrome. I think it's Chrome 41. So if you have really bleeding-edge modern JavaScript stuff on your website that you need to have indexed, you should probably test that to make sure that we can actually index that properly. If you have normal JavaScript things like jQuery scripts that just kind of run on older browsers too, then usually that's less of a problem. So I think we looked at most of these. Like I said, we look at it page by page. We don't crawl your website completely at once. We do that page by page. We're trying to be polite. We're waiting to make sure that we don't cause problems. We understand that nobody is perfect. No pages out there are perfect. So when we look at a page for indexing, we don't test to see, is this valid HTML? Is the CSS well-formed? We understand that a lot of the web is broken, has broken HTML, because you have different plugins and includes, and all of that kind of is a hassle to make it work perfectly. We understand that. One big thing that we also do is we deal with duplication on the internet. A large part of the web that we see is repetitive. It's the same thing over and over again. Sometimes it's as simple as you have pages on www and non-www, and it's the same thing. or HTTP and HTTPS, and it's the same page. And we've seen both of those pages, and we could index both of those pages separately, but that doesn't make any sense, and it doesn't help your website, it doesn't help us, so we have to fold that together. We have to be able to understand that. And then finally, for indexing, this is something that more and more has come up in the last couple of years, that we try to understand the pages more than just a collection of words. We try to understand what are the concepts on this page. What is this page about? Is this about a specific city, a location? Is this about an event? And what date might be associated with this page? All of this kind of extra information, we try to figure that out while we index these pages. And you can help us with that too. So there's some things that kind of come together there. Like I mentioned, the words on the page help us a little bit to understand, but a lot of the metadata and kind of hidden information on a page helps us as well. So structured data is a big thing. How many of you have implemented anything with structured data? A few, okay. Rich snippets? Some as well, yeah. So I think it's kind of tricky because we have so many different names for kind of the same things. So some people call it schema.org markup or structured data. We use this markup for rich snippets. We show that in the search results. So they're different names for kind of the same thing. Essentially, what it means is you have the words on your page, and you tell us this is a word about this specific entity, and give us more explicit information about what it is that you actually mean. And sometimes that's as simple as saying, this is a review, and there are 4 stars here. Sometimes you can give us a lot more information about people, about saying this is a profile page. All of these things, they help us to understand the pages better. We crawl a lot of pages, so you can imagine the web is pretty big. We've seen well over 60 trillion pages through our crawling. Just to give you a little bit of context how much that actually is, if you print those pages out and collect them, it's not like a library full. It's 16 piles of paper all the way to the moon. So if you just stack that paper up. So you can imagine there's a lot of content on the web, and it's not something that you can just trivially search through or put into a MySQL database and say, okay, I will select from my database which pages actually match these words. So that's a lot of interesting work, I think, that our engineering teams do to make it so that you can enter a word, and within a fraction of a second, Google is able to look through this pile of paper and tell you which pages are actually relevant. So that kind of brings us to the next part. We've collected information about the pages. We've crawled through the web, following links to all of these different pages. We've indexed a lot of the content there. So the next step is kind of the ranking. So if someone searches for something, we sometimes have thousands of pages that have these words on them somewhere, and figuring out how to rank them is very hard. So this is something where when I talk with non-webmaster, non-technical audiences, usually they say, what is Google actually still doing? I mean, search is finished, right? There's nothing more to do. For us, there's just so much more that's tricky when it comes to search. We try to understand what people are actually searching for. That's a really big problem for us, or I don't know, problem, it's a challenge, let's put it that way, because that changes all the time as well. I put the number down here. Over 15% of the searches we see every day are things we have never seen before. So we can't collect all of the searches that people make and just cache the answers and say, oh, these are always the same answers. We have to constantly think about what is new, what people are searching for, and understand what it is and how they're searching. And that's something I notice when I talk to kids very, very explicitly. They search very differently than I do. So when I learned how to use the internet, how to search, it was always, I start with one keyword, and if I have wrong results, I add another keyword, and then I search for keyword, 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 and then maybe minus for things I don't want. And it's very mechanical almost. But nowadays, when people search on Google, they just ask a question. So you go to a school and you talk about search and you see how they search and they say, why is the sky blue? They don't say sky blue. They ask a real question. Or maybe they'll ask a question with things like not in there, or with things that have comparisons in them. It's like, what is a vehicle? Like a car, but not a bicycle. And Google has to understand what it is that they're actually looking for and try to find where we have content to match what it is that they're looking for. And often that's not taking those words in the search and saying, oh, this word has to be on the page, this word has to be on the page, this word is on the page, therefore this page is a right match. We have to understand there are synonyms, there are abbreviations, there are complicated ways to phrase things. So I think that's important for you as webmasters, as people working on websites to understand as well, that you don't have to match one-to-one what people are actually searching for. So, and I guess once we have collected a bunch of URLs that we want to show in the search results, it's also a matter of presenting yourself in the best light. So it's not, I always, when I talk with webmasters, I always say it's not about ranking in the search results or being visible in the search results, but rather being something that is relevant for the user in the search results. So it doesn't matter if you're ranking first for a query, if all of the users, when they look at that search results page, say, this page is not what I was looking for. And you can control that a little bit by using various markup elements on your pages, various things on the pages themselves to kind of differentiate yourself from other websites out there, but also to make it clearer for the user what it is that you really have on your pages. Because it doesn't matter if someone clicks on your page, if they land there and they say, oh, I didn't actually want a recipe, I wanted the history of this dish. So that's something where the clearer you can make it what you're actually presenting, the more likely they'll click through and they'll be able to do what it is they were looking for. So there are lots of options out there now with recipes on mobile, with different other types of elements. We have different kinds of rich results that pull in information from structured data. Kind of ratings, the time that it takes, calories, if we have that information. These are things that you can mark up on your pages with the structured data. There are carousels you can set up with different things, with images that you can highlight. And it doesn't matter if you have fantastic content or kind of weird content like this. It's all available for you. So it's something that you can make use of if you want. I know there are some really fancy plugins that make this a little bit easier for you, but sometimes you still have to mess with the HTML and mess with the markup that's generated so that you really get the right structured data markup that you want. So all of this kind of comes together in a few items that I think might be useful for you. The first one, site-wide changes take time. This is something I mentioned indirectly a few times in that we crawl per page. So if you make a big change on your website, it's not going to happen overnight. If you move your whole website to HTTPS or to a new domain name, or if you change your whole layout, your whole internal URL structure, that will take time because we have to look at it page by page. And some of those pages we can pick up within a couple of days. Some of those pages take weeks, months even, to really get picked up. You have a question?
Oh, that was the question. How long usually does it take to get feedback?
Yeah, it really depends. And if you explicitly look for your content, you can often still find the old content half a year later. But usually the more important content, we try to recrawl it as quickly as possible. Yeah.
Possible to afford to make it
Sure.
Google, I changed it.
There's some things that you can do, like a sitemap file that you can submit. There's a sitemap plugin for WordPress. If in the sitemap file, if you say all of these pages have changed today, then we can crawl that a little bit faster. The other thing is, of course, if your server is a lot faster, then we can crawl more anyway. Sitemap. Sitemap. The other thing, when it comes to content, just focusing on keywords is not really the most important part. So really think about like what people are trying to do. I have a bit more on that. Titles and descriptions is something that's so basic, but so useful. So that's what people see in the search results as a title for your page, as a description for the page. And that's a chance for you to really put your best foot forward and say, this is what this page is about, so that those who are looking for that information, they can go there. So don't just put keywords in there and say, oh, I want to rank for this keyword, this keyword, this keyword, but really say this is what this page is about. Small technical issues are usually not a problem. So like I mentioned, no page is perfect. There's always HTML errors. If you run your pages through Validator, you always wonder, oh, why does this even work at all? There are almost always errors. I don't know of any website that really is able to manage without any of these HTML errors. But at the same time, for structured data, it's helpful to have markup that you can kind of mark up with those additional attributes fairly easily. So if you have really, really messy HTML, then it's hard to say this is the title because it's like in a span and a div and it's really messed up. But if you have reasonably clean HTML, then that's a lot easier to add this kind of markup. All right. So, still awake? Kind of? OK. Coffee is still working. That's good. Second part, I think this is something that a lot of sites that I see have trouble with this, and it's something that is very much under your control. And this is something that makes it a lot harder for us, too, than it really needs to be. So we see this a lot of time with websites that work together with really expert designers, let's say, that make really fancy, nice-looking websites. But when you look at the website as an outsider, you don't really know what it is they're trying to do. Are they selling a service? Are they selling a product? Are they trying to sell a book? It's really unclear what is behind this website. What is the purpose of this website? So as the business owner, you say, oh, of course, this is my consultant business. But someone will look at it and say, oh, there are so many motivational sayings here on this website, and all of the logo is an image, and kind of the tag text is just a random motivational phrase. It's like, I have no idea what to do with this website. And this is something that's even more of a problem for Google because we have no idea either. We look at those pages and we see there are lots of words on here. We can index those words. I can understand this concept and see an address here. But I don't know what I should be showing this website for. So that's something that I think is really, really critical. So if you're working on your website, if you're working for clients or other people on their websites, really make sure that when you start, you think about the purpose of this website. What is it that you want to achieve with this website? And that you kind of keep that along for the whole train of thought that you're working on this website. And also, at the same time, who is it that you want to talk to? What is the level of the audience that you want to reach? So that when you think about the content that you generate for this website, when you think about maintenance and design changes, you always keep in mind, this is the language that my users speak. This is what they will be searching for. This is what they will understand. And this is what I want them to do so that you can guide them that direction, but also so that search engines understand where they should be placing your website, what they should be doing there. And this last item here is something I see a lot from people who know a little bit about SEO, who have read some SEO blogs, and who kind of think, well, keywords are really important, and I want to rank for these keywords because that's really the best word that like lots of people are searching for it, and that's what I want to be. Therefore, my domain name or my brand name will be this keyword. And then they assume that because Google tries to recognize names, Google will say, oh, best cars, that is always this website. But at the same time, best cars is such a generic phrase that it could mean anything. So instead of focusing on generic keywords and using that as your name, really take something that people can find you under. And I think that's kind of almost like free traffic from search with regards to your website, in the sense that if you have a unique name and people are searching for your name, they will always be able to find your website. No matter what you do with SEO, they will always be able to find your website. Whereas if your name is so generic that it could be anything, then they're going to find everyone else but your website. So that's something I'd really recommend, especially when you get started. All right. So we talked about this a little bit. So I think we can kind of skip this. Part here that I think is also really useful is to look at micro conversions. So this is a kind of an interesting concept in the sense that you know what you want people to do in the end. Maybe they should buy something from you, they should become a customer, they should come to your store in person and do something, but there are also lots and lots of small steps along the way. And that's things like looking at your address page, or looking at your contact form, or looking at a page that has your phone number and opening hours on it. All of these are small steps along the way that you could be tracking, that you could be making sure that people are actually able to complete these small tasks. And if you track the kind of conversions, the completion of these tasks, then that makes it a lot easier for you to optimize for them as well over time, where you see, well, people are not finding my opening hours or not looking at my opening hours, therefore it's no wonder nobody comes to my store. So what can you do to make sure that everyone is able to find your opening hours, and kind of think about it step by step. All right, so technology, I think for the most part it's easier because it's something that is more of a yes or no situation, and you can implement it or not. It's less of something that where consultants will come to you and say, oh, it depends on your website what you need to do, like when you're talking about audiences. So I put HTTPS on top here. Who does not yet use HTTPS? Okay, I have to admit, I don't have HTTPS on my blog yet either. So I think I haven't written a blog post since maybe 8 or 9 years, so that's my excuse. But if you are active on your website, and especially on a blog, then that's something where I think HTTPS is almost a requirement nowadays. And come October, what will happen in Chrome is that we will flag pages that have a text field on them that are not on HTTPS yet. So on WordPress, on a random blog, you always have a contact form, you have a search field somewhere, and anytime someone clicks on that field and your website is not on HTTPS, then there will be a small warning shown in the address bar saying this page is not secure. The information that you enter into this field might be intercepted along the way, might be tracked along the way. So it's not that we're blocking these websites, but it's something that, from my point of view, is kind of a requirement for the modern web, for the next steps on the web. Then mobile friendly. I'm pretty sure most of you have heard about this. Are any of you still working with a website that does not yet have a real mobile friendly design? Okay, so I have to admit, like Search Console, I help with Search Console a lot. The current version of Search Console doesn't really work on mobile, so it's you don't have to be ashamed. I'm not going to ask for your name. It's something that I know it's a lot of work to change a bigger website to be mobile friendly or to be responsive. That's, from my point of view, kind of the best option for mobile friendliness. It depends a bit on the CMS that you have. But especially as we move forward, that's a big topic. Speed is another thing. I don't have any kind of hard lines to draw with regards to speed, but you all know if a website is really slow, you don't do a lot of stuff on that website. Whereas if a website is very fast and you click around and then suddenly you see the opening hours and you see their location, all of that is a lot more visible. Clean markup, structured data, I mentioned before. Staying safe from hacking is probably always a topic for WordPress. I know since I haven't written blog posts since like 2008 or so, I tend to install a lot more security updates than I make any changes on my website. But that's, I think, an important part of having a website, making sure that you stay safe. That's something where we see a lot of websites really have big problems in search, in that they get hacked in weird ways. And finally, okay, we're coming to the end of the time, so I'm almost in line here. Finally, from my point of view, it's important that whatever you build on your website, that you're able to build it in a way that allows you to move quickly in the future. So instead of keeping hacking things together and adding more band-aids and another weird hack to make this work and another hack to make this work, think about what you can do to make it easier for you to kind of move to the next type of technology. So if you want to implement AMP, how easy is that to do? Is that something you can just activate a plugin? Or do you have to change all of this hard-coded HTML that you've worked on for years and years to actually make bigger changes? Maybe you want to try out a PWA where you have something that works offline. If you've kind of built your website in a structured way, then sometimes that's a lot easier to do than if you've kind of built all of the spaghetti website together. And I know everyone has the parts of their website that they're kind of ashamed of, that they don't want anyone to know about. But this is something to keep in mind for the future, in that these technologies, they will always come and go. And if you kind of cement yourself into a corner with all of this spaghetti code, it's a lot harder to get through. And the last one here is voice interactions. More and more, I see these assistant devices out there. I have a couple at home, some from Amazon, some from Google, and I never would have thought that people would be using them so often. So my kids interact with these all the time. They ask queries, and it's something where, as a business owner, probably not all websites will be suitable for these type of voice interactions, but I'm sure there are some models that will work really, really well. And if you're the one who figures this out, then that's like your advantage. And there's so much content out there on how to design conversations that I'd really encourage you to kind of, when you take a break, read up on this, try some of the videos, try some of these devices out, and think about where your business could fit in if nobody looked at websites anymore. All right, so the summary, things I've talked about before: clean, strong foundation. Make sure you have a purpose for your website, you know which audience you're talking to, and that you're able to stay curious, stay nimble, keep moving. All right, so I think with that, I'm pretty much at the end, and I think we have like 10 minutes for questions, something like that. All right.
Okay, thank you, John, very much for the presentation. Thanks for asking questions already, but give John a round of applause for his presentation.
Thank you.
Yeah, we have 10 minutes till the next talk, so if there are any other questions. John, I think you can hear people anyway without the microphone.
Sure,
but,
yeah.
Are you indexing mobile design and desktop design differently?
At the moment, we focus on the desktop pages for indexing, but we're going to shift to the mobile pages for indexing. And the idea behind that is that most people are using mobile devices now for the internet, and we want to make sure that the search results reflect what most people would see. I don't have an absolute answer for that. I think these different metrics, they look at various parts of the bigger picture. And it's something where individual metrics, they can help you understand where you have bottlenecks on your website. And sometimes those are things that are more visible in analytics, sometimes more visible in Search Console or in the testing tools. Sometimes those are specific elements that a testing tool can check for. But it's up to you to interpret those tools. It's not that we say this tool must show 75 and then it's okay. It's really up to you to understand this means I can improve on things, and maybe this is like one aspect that's really easy for me to change that moves things up quite a bit.
The second one is like feature snippets are available in English for the most part. Do you have any idea what more languages should be available for the future?
I think they're available in most languages now. I don't know for sure, but I know for sure in German and a lot of the European languages, we definitely have that. So featured snippets, just to explain, that's when you search for something and the result from the website is right on top and pretty big. It's kind of a bigger snippet than just like a small entry in the search results page. And often that's something that we can pull out in response to a specific question that the user has. When someone says, why is the sky blue? Then we can say it's blue because of this, which I don't know by heart. Maybe I should figure that out. Yeah. Yeah. All right. Bye.
Does having Google Analytics on the website installed, we know people who have more information about the website by using Google Analytics, does that in any way influence indexing or?
No, it doesn't change anything for search or ranking. So that's not something that we would use for the search side. I think it's really useful information for the webmaster, but it's not necessarily something that we would use for search. And part of that is because we want to make sure that we're neutral towards all of these products out there. So if you use analytics or AdSense or AdWords or whatever, it should be irrelevant for us. From a search side, we want to stay neutral and say, all of these pages should be reviewed on their own merits, not on whether or not they use Google products.
Okay, we have the next question down here.
I'll be fast. I have noticed the option that you have add this website to add this URL to Google. There is that option. So if I create a website, why should I wait for 2 weeks or 3 weeks to be in Google? I can add that thing, and then it is in a day or two.
Yeah.
Is that a better option to do, or to wait naturally or something like that? Thank you.
Yeah, if you want to submit it directly, I would do that. That's especially if you have a very new website, that makes a lot of sense. It's the first step, you're in there right away. I think it's important to keep in mind, though, that especially if it's a very new website, it's hard for us to understand how we should be showing it in search. So we might have it indexed, we know it exists, but if there's a lot of competition for these words, like where does it fit in? We don't really know a lot about this website yet. And over time, we learn a lot more about the website and we can place it in the search results properly. In the beginning, it's often we start somewhere and then we see like maybe shift it up and down depending on what kind of factors that we find for it. But submitting it to Google is a great way to start.
Okay, 1 second. Anybody else while I'm up here?
Okay.
Okay. Thank you very much for this presentation. The first ever guy I saw who is in SEO business, really, not all others claiming, haven't optimized any search engine at all. The question is about HTTPS. You mentioned that there will be a notification for pages not using HTTPS. What about broken CAs? Will there be a notification as well?
For what?
Broken CAs. Certificate authorities.
Oh, broken certificate authorities. So So this notification is specific to Chrome, and Chrome does have kind of its line of certificate authorities that it accepts, kind of like any other modern browser. So if it's a broken certificate authority or kind of this broken chain in the certificate, then that's something that Chrome would probably flag with the broken lock symbol. And I believe it would also flag those as not secure when you enter text into those fields. I'm not 100% sure how Chrome would handle that. So from a search point of view, we do use HTTPS as a ranking factor as well, but it's a very small factor. And it's more something where we say, is this HTTPS or not? We currently don't look at it and say, oh, there's mixed content here, it's not perfect HTTPS, or the certificate isn't really working that well. But if the version we index is HTTPS, then for us that's enough to kind of give this like really small little boost.
Okay, are there any more questions?
Yes, we do look at that. So if a page is, for example, purely desktop page, then we use the desktop page for indexing, obviously. But if we have a desktop page and the desktop page says this is the mobile version of this page, then we say, well, this is the version that mobile users will see, therefore we will index this version. So it kind of depends on the specific setup there. And if you have a responsive page, then obviously the same page will be shown once for desktop and once kind of smaller view for mobile as well. We do have subtly different ranking factors on mobile devices. For example, we look at speed a lot more. We look at interstitials more. If you show something that blocks the main content on mobile, it's a lot more of a hassle than on desktop, where you can easily click the X. On mobile, you kind of have to aim and zoom around to get rid of that. So some of that is different. If you have pages where the content itself is very different on desktop and mobile, then that's something where I would recommend making just separate pages. And you have one page with the scientific content, the scientific text for the more scientific audience who wants to see a desktop page and the full content, and maybe a simplified page that has the more layman text on it that works well on mobile. And you make that one mobile, and you keep your desktop page separate. And both of these pages can be indexed separately. And then if someone is searching for the scientific text, they find the scientific page. If they search for the simpler text, they find the simpler mobile page. So that kind of solves it automatically there. But it's a tricky problem. It's something you have to think about what your users are doing now and what will happen in the next couple of years. Because even myself, when I look at technical information, I do that more and more on my phone. All right.
Okay, that's great. It's a fantastic, great start to the day. Fascinating questions as well. Thank you very much. A round of applause for John, so we can carry on to the next bloke.
Thank you.